The Millionaire CEO said, "Bring me a real architect." But instead, the gardener's daughter walked into his life with a 5-year-old girl and shattered everything he thought was unshakable. The late afternoon sun poured a golden haze over the sprawling construction site, casting long shadows across the freshly paved walkways and the skeletal frames of half-built gazebos. Andrew Collins stood with his hands in the pockets of his tailored navy suit, his expression as sharp and controlled as the crease in his trousers. The site manager trailed 2 steps behind, rattling off numbers, deadlines, and excuses, but Andrew's attention was elsewhere. It was supposed to be a routine inspection of the new luxury park project, a project already months behind schedule, plagued by mistakes and costly delays. He hated inefficiency. Every misplaced brick, every unfinished corner gnawed at him like a personal insult. This park was meant to be his company's signature statement of elegance, an emblem of perfection. Instead, it felt like a battlefield of mediocrity. He was about to turn sharply toward the rose garden section when movement caught his eye. A figure crouched low among the flower beds. She wore a simple green gardener's uniform, the knees stained with fresh soil. One hand was buried deep in the earth, adjusting the base of a newly planted rose bush, while the other rested protectively on the small hand of a little girl standing beside her. The child couldn't have been more than 5, with a halo of soft blonde hair that caught the sunlight and turned it almost white. She clutched a small watering can, her eyes wide with fascination as she watched the woman work. The two looked so absorbed in their task that they seemed almost part of the garden itself, an island of stillness amid the noise of construction. Andrew stopped mid-step. Something about the sight, the woman's quiet focus, the way she instinctively shielded the girl from the dust and debris around them, pulled him out of his thoughts of budgets and deadlines. "Who is that?" he asked, his voice cutting through the manager's monologue like a blade. The man followed his gaze and hesitated. "Sophia Miller," he said finally. "She's been with us only a few weeks. Works in the landscaping team. Her father's one of the longtime gardeners here." Andrew's brow furrowed slightly. "And the child?" The manager cleared his throat. "Her daughter. I told her the site isn't really a place for kids, but she insists. Says she has no other option." Andrew's eyes narrowed as he studied them again. Sophia, unaware of the scrutiny, leaned over to guide the little girl's hands as they poured water around the plant. A few strands of her dark hair had slipped loose from the messy knot at the back of her head, brushing against her cheek in the breeze. There was no makeup, no jewelry, nothing to draw attention, yet there was something striking about her. It was in the way she carried herself. A quiet strength, a kind of unspoken defiance against the chaos around her. He didn't know why he was still standing there, watching. He wasn't the kind of man to notice employees beyond their work output, and he certainly wasn't the type to concern himself with their personal lives. And yet, for a reason he couldn't name, he felt an odd pull, as though this small moment, this woman and her child in the middle of his project, mattered more than it should have. "Bring her to my office tomorrow," Andrew said suddenly, turning away before the manager could respond. His voice was firm, but beneath it was something else, an unfamiliar undercurrent he couldn't quite identify. As he walked on, the sound of the little girl's laughter followed him, light and clear, threading through the noise of drills and hammers. For the first time that day, Andrew's thoughts strayed from deadlines and profit margins. Sophia didn't notice the tall man in the navy suit until his shadow fell across her. The warmth of the sun on her back gave way to a sudden coolness, and when she glanced up, she found herself looking into a pair of deep brown eyes that held the weight of quiet authority. For a moment, she didn't place him. She wasn't the type to follow corporate gossip or memorize the faces in the glossy executive spotlight pages her colleagues sometimes passed around. But there was no mistaking the presence he carried. Confident, deliberate, commanding without a single word. Andrew Collins, the CEO. He stood there like a man who owned not just the land beneath their feet, but the air they breathed. His gaze swept over the flower bed, the tools scattered at her side, and then stopped on the little girl holding tightly to her hand. "Why is there a child on site?" His tone wasn't raised, but it was the kind of low, measured voice that made people answer quickly. Sophia felt the question land like a weight between them. She straightened, brushing dirt from her gloves, and met his eyes without flinching. "Because I have no one to leave her with." Her voice was calm even, but there was an edge to it, something that said she didn't intend to apologize for her life. Lily, sensing the shift in the air, pressed closer to her mother's leg. Andrew's gaze flicked briefly to the little girl, softening for the smallest fraction of a second before it returned to Sophia. "This is a construction zone," he said. "It's not safe." Sophia nodded slightly. "I know, I keep her close, and I watch her every second." Most people in her position would have fumbled through apologies or scrambled to justify themselves, but Sophia simply stood her ground. It struck him as unusual, refreshing even. She didn't seem intimidated by his title or the tailored perfection of his suit. Andrew glanced at the watering can in Lily's hand. "Does she work here too?" The corners of Sophia's mouth curved, just barely. "She thinks she does." There was a quiet moment where neither spoke, but both were aware of the subtle shift between them. Andrew had come here to reprimand, to enforce rules, but something about the woman in front of him made him pause. There was no pleading in her eyes, no attempt to charm her way out of trouble, just a straightforward honesty that caught him off guard. He should have moved on, should have told her to make other arrangements, but instead he found himself asking, "What's your name?" "Sophia Miller." "And hers?" "Lily." Lily peeked out from behind her mother's leg, her blue eyes wide, curious but cautious. Andrew gave her a small nod, the kind he might give an adult in a boardroom, as if acknowledging her as an equal. The little girl blinked at him, then tightened her grip on Sophia's hand. For a man like Andrew, conversations were transactions. They had beginnings, purposes, and endings, all aimed at results. This one, however, refused to fit into that box. He didn't know why he was still standing there, or why he wanted to ask more questions. "You'll come to my office tomorrow morning," he said at last. It wasn't a request. Sophia arched a brow. "Am I in trouble?" "Not yet," he replied, though there was the faintest trace of something, humor, perhaps, hidden in his tone. Without another word, he stepped back, turning to leave. As he walked away, Sophia watched him go, her mind turning over the unexpected encounter. Men like Andrew Collins lived in another world, one of glass towers, luxury cars, and dinner meetings that shaped cities. She had no business being in his thoughts, and he certainly had no place in hers. Still, when she felt Lily tug gently at her sleeve and whisper, "Who was that, Mommy?" Sophia realized she didn't have a simple answer. The next morning, Andrew sat behind the sleek walnut desk in his top-floor office, a skyline of glass and steel, sprawling beyond the wall of windows behind him. The air carried the faint scent of fresh espresso, untouched and cooling on his desk, as he reviewed the list of meetings ahead. His assistant had scheduled Sophia Miller for 9:30. He told himself it was a matter of safety protocols and company liability, yet he knew there was more to it, something that gnawed at his thoughts since he had left the park. When the door opened, Sophia stepped inside with a quiet confidence that surprised him. She wore simple jeans and a clean green polo with the company's landscaping logo embroidered on the chest. Her hair was pulled back neatly, though a few loose strands framed her face. Lily wasn't with her this time, and the absence made the room feel oddly emptier. "Ms. Miller," he greeted, gesturing toward the chair across from him. "Mr. Collins," she said, sitting down with the same unflinching gaze she'd had the day before. She didn't fidget, didn't glance around at the opulent office the way most employees did. "I want to be clear," he began, folding his hands on the desk. "Construction sites are dangerous. You can't bring your daughter there. I understand your situation may be complicated, but—" She cut in, not sharply, but firmly enough to stop him. "It's not complicated. It's just the way it is. I'm raising her on my own. Her father's not in the picture, and I don't have family nearby. I take her with me because I don't have the kind of money for childcare. That's all." The simplicity of her explanation struck him harder than any elaborate excuse could have. There was no bitterness in her tone, no trace of self-pity, just fact. "And her father?" he asked before he could stop himself. She hesitated, her eyes flicking briefly to the window as if weighing whether to answer. "He left when Lily was 3. She was sick, very sick. It scared him, I guess. He said he couldn't handle the hospital visits, the bills, me. So he walked away." Andrew leaned back in his chair, absorbing her words. He'd heard stories of abandonment before, but something about the way she said it, flat, stripped of drama, hit differently. She wasn't telling it to gain sympathy. She was simply giving him the truth. "What was wrong with her?" he asked quietly. Heart condition, Sophia replied. She had surgery. She's better now, but we still do regular checkups. Her hands rested calmly in her lap, but he noticed the faint tension in her shoulders, the kind of weight that came from years of carrying everything alone. For a man who lived in a world where problems were fixed with phone calls and bank transfers, Andrew found himself oddly unsettled. He could have solved half her struggles in an hour if she let him, yet something told him that if he offered money outright, she'd refuse. Why work here? He asked finally. She met his eyes again. Because I'm good at it. My father's been in landscaping for 30 years. He taught me how to design gardens, not just plant them. I like seeing things grow. And because it's steady work close to home, he should have ended the conversation there, issued a formal warning about safety, and moved on to his next meeting. But he didn't. Instead, he found himself picturing her crouched over the flower beds with Lily by her side. And for reasons he couldn't explain, the image stayed with him like an unanswered question. When she stood to leave, he said, Ms. Miller, I'll have the site supervisor find you a safer space to work when you have your daughter with you. For now, keep her close to the main gardens. Understood? Sophia paused at the door. Understood. She hesitated for a fraction of a second before adding, Thank you. It was a small word, but the way she said it, measured, genuine, settled into him more deeply than it should have. And when she was gone, Andrew found himself staring at the closed door, wondering why her voice still echoed in the silence. Andrew told himself it was just coincidence, that he happened to have more on-site inspections scheduled that week than usual, that his presence at the gardens was purely business, nothing more. But the truth was, each visit seemed to pull him back to that same stretch of flower beds where Sophia worked. The first time he saw her again after their meeting, she was kneeling in the grass, arranging a cluster of white hydrangeas into a precise curve along the path. Lily sat nearby on a blanket, carefully coloring in a picture book. The child glanced up at him with the same cautious curiosity as before, and this time he found himself smiling, just a little. Lily didn't smile back, at least not right away, but her eyes lingered on him longer than before, as if deciding whether or not he could be trusted. Those hydrangeas are for the east path? He asked, standing with his hands in his pockets. Sophia straightened, brushing dirt from her gloves. They are. They bloom full and long, and they'll still hold color into early autumn. You've thought about it, he remarked. I always do, she replied simply, returning her attention to the plants. He should have walked away. Normally, he didn't linger around staff when they were working. Efficiency mattered too much to waste time. But instead, he found himself watching the way her hands moved. Steady, precise, knowing exactly how much pressure to apply to the soil without damaging the roots. There was a quiet competence about her, the kind that didn't demand attention but earned it anyway. Over the next few days, these encounters kept happening. Once he passed by just as she was teaching Lily the difference between annuals and perennials, her voice patient and warm, her daughter's small hands digging clumsy holes for marigolds. Another time, he found her sketching a new arrangement for the butterfly garden, a pencil tucked behind her ear, the paper dotted with soft graphite lines and notes in neat handwriting. He began making excuses for conversation, asking about the types of soil, the watering schedule, the reasons behind her design choices. Sometimes Lily would chime in with her own unfiltered commentary, making Sophia roll her eyes in mock exasperation. One afternoon, as the sky shifted toward the warm tones of sunset, he caught sight of them near the fountain. Lily was running in small circles around the base, her laughter spilling out like music, while Sophia knelt to adjust a loose stone in the border. Your daughter seems happy here, Andrew said as he approached. Sophia looked up at him, a small smile playing at her lips. She is. She likes being outside, and she likes the fountain. He glanced at the splashing water, then at her. What about you? The question seemed to take her off guard. She blinked once, as if she'd been expecting something about work or deadlines. I like making things beautiful, she said at last. It's peaceful. And after the last few years, peace is something I don't take for granted. There was a shadow behind her words, the echo of struggles she hadn't shared. He wanted to ask, but something told him she wasn't ready to tell him more. So instead, he said quietly, everyone deserves a little peace. For a moment, they just stood there, the air between them charged with something neither of them named. Lily's laughter floated around them, and the late-day light caught in Sophia's dark hair, turning it almost bronze at the edges. Andrew realized then that he was breaking his own rules. He'd always kept a strict boundary between himself and the people who worked for him. Yet here he was, finding reasons to be near her, looking forward to these brief conversations more than he cared to admit. When he finally walked away, he told himself again that it was just coincidence. But deep down, he knew better. The air had shifted. Sophia could feel it before she knew why. An uneasy current moving through the otherwise steady rhythm of her days. It began with small things. The site manager avoiding her eyes, conversation stopping abruptly when she passed by, the faint hum of whispers carried on the wind. Then came the letter. Folded neatly into an envelope without a return address, it was slipped under her tools one morning. She almost didn't open it, thinking it was some routine memo, but inside was a single sheet of paper, the words typed in stark black ink. "We know about your daughter's condition. Help us, and she'll have everything she needs. Refuse, and you'll regret it." There was no name, no signature, just a phone number scrawled at the bottom in rushed handwriting. Sophia's hands tightened around the paper until it crumpled. She glanced instinctively toward the office building, half expecting to see someone watching her. But the garden was empty except for Lily, who was sitting cross-legged on the grass a few feet away, humming to herself as she sorted through a pile of smooth stones she had collected. The message wasn't a request, it was a threat. And though no details were given, Sophia had no doubt who it was from. There had been rumors for weeks about a rival developer circling Andrew's company, looking for a way in, a weak point to exploit. Apparently, they thought they'd found it in her. That afternoon, she found herself face-to-face with the man behind it. He introduced himself as Daniel Ross, a name she'd only heard in passing during overheard conversations among the supervisors. He was polished in the way men like that often were, expensive suit, careful smile, eyes that never seemed to blink enough. "I think we can help each other," he said, leaning casually against the low stone wall near the gardens, as if they were simply making polite conversation. "Your little girl still needs regular medical checkups, doesn't she? That can get costly." Sophia froze, her grip tightening on the handle of her spade. "I don't know what you're talking about." Daniel's smile didn't falter, but his voice dropped, losing its pretensive charm. "I'm talking about opportunity. You're close to Collins. You see things, hear things. All I'm asking for is information, nothing dramatic. In exchange, you'll never have to worry about Lily's care again." It wasn't the money that made her blood run cold. It was the casual way he spoke about her daughter, as if she were a bargaining chip in some business game. "You should leave," she said, her voice low but sharp. "Think about it," he replied, straightening his tie. "This isn't about hurting anyone. It's about leveling the field." He glanced toward Lily, who was now chasing a butterfly across the lawn, her laughter ringing out in the sunlight. "Children deserve stability. Don't you agree?" Sophia's jaw clenched. "Get out." Daniel didn't argue. He simply walked away, leaving a faint scent of cologne in the air and a heaviness in her chest that stayed long after he was gone. For the next few days, she kept the encounter to herself. She didn't want to drag Andrew into whatever this was. It wasn't his problem, and the last thing she needed was for him to think she was a liability. She doubled down on her work, kept Lily even closer than before, and pretended everything was normal. But the threat hung over her like a gathering storm, and it didn't take long for it to break. Late one afternoon, the site manager approached with an awkward stiffness. "Sophia," he said, avoiding her gaze, "I'm afraid we have to let you go." "Orders from higher up," her heart sank. "Why?" "Budget cuts," he said quickly, too quickly. Nothing personal, but she knew better. This wasn't about budgets. It was about making her vulnerable, isolating her so she'd have no choice but to accept Daniel Ross's offer. That night, after Lily had fallen asleep, Sophia sat alone at the small kitchen table in their rented apartment, staring at the stack of unpaid bills in front of her. She could still hear Daniel's voice in her head, smooth and poisonous. "You'll never have to worry again." Her pride told her to fight. Her fear whispered she couldn't afford to. And somewhere in the back of her mind, unbidden, came the image of Andrew Collins, his steady gaze, the unshakable way he stood, as if he could take on the whole world and win. She pushed the thought away. Men like Andrew didn't come looking for women like her. and she was determined not to need saving. Andrew found out by accident. It was late evening, the city already wrapped in the glow of streetlights when his phone buzzed with a message from the head of HR. It was a standard end-of-day report, nothing urgent, until one line caught his attention. Employee separation notice, Sophia Miller. Effective immediately. He read it twice, his jaw tightening. No explanation was given, just the standard budgetary reasons note attached. It was too clean, too abrupt. He didn't believe it for a second. By the time he called the site manager, his voice had that edge that made grown men scramble for answers. Within minutes, he knew the truth, at least part of it. Rumors of a competitor sniffing around, someone making offers to staff. No one could confirm details, but the pieces were enough for Andrew to put together a picture he didn't like. And Sophia? She was gone. Just gone. He didn't go home. Instead, he found himself behind the wheel of his black sedan, the city blurring past in streaks of neon and shadow as he drove toward the address HR had on file. The building was small, worn at the edges, the kind of place where the paint on the stairwell walls peeled in long strips. The hallway smelled faintly of old wood and detergent. He knocked once, firm enough to be heard but not so hard as to startle. When the door opened, Sophia stood there in jeans and a faded t-shirt, her hair loose around her shoulders. Her eyes widened when she saw him. "Mr. Collins?" He didn't answer right away. He was too busy taking in the sight of her. Barefoot, tired, yet still holding herself upright with that same quiet strength he'd noticed from the beginning. Over her shoulder, he caught sight of Lily sitting at the kitchen table, drawing on a piece of paper with a box of crayons. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, his voice lower than usual, the words carrying more weight than the simple question. She glanced back toward Lily, then stepped into the hallway, pulling the door nearly shut behind her. "Tell you what? That you were being pressured, that someone was threatening you." His tone was sharper now, but not with anger at her. Anger at whoever had put her in this position. Her gaze was steady, though her fingers curled slightly against the doorframe. "Because it's not your problem." "The hell it's not," he said. "You work for me. They went after you to get to me. That makes it my problem twice over." She shook her head. "You don't understand. She stopped herself, glancing away. "If I fought it, they'd make things worse. And if I took their offer, I couldn't live with myself." Andrew stepped closer, his voice softening. "Sophia, I can handle worse. What I can't handle is knowing they think they can intimidate someone under my protection, or that you think you have to go through this alone." Something in her expression shifted then, just slightly, a crack in the wall she'd built. "And Lily?" he asked, his voice dropping even lower. "She's fine?" "Yes," Sophia said immediately. "She's asleep most nights before I can even think straight. She doesn't know what's happening. I want to keep it that way." He nodded, the tension in his jaw easing, but only slightly. "I'm going to take care of this. No one threatens you, and no one uses your daughter against you. Not while I'm here." She gave a quiet, almost disbelieving laugh. "You make it sound so simple." "It is simple," he said, holding her gaze. "They crossed a line. And when someone crosses a line with me, I erase the line entirely." For a moment, they just stood there in the narrow hallway, the hum of the building's old pipes filling the silence. Then Andrew reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope, pressing it into her hand. "This covers whatever Lily needs, medical, school, everything." Her eyes narrowed. "Andrew." "It's not charity," he interrupted. "It's me making sure you're not forced into a corner again." She looked at the envelope, then back at him. "You didn't have to." "I did," he said quietly. "Because whether you want to admit it or not, you matter to me." Sophia didn't answer right away. Instead, she let out a slow breath, her fingers tightening around the envelope, as if unsure whether to accept it or hand it back. Finally, she said, "You're going to make it very hard to keep my distance." A faint smile touched his lips. "Good." When he left that night, the air outside felt colder, sharper, but his mind was clear. He wasn't just going to protect her. He was going to make sure Daniel Ross, and anyone like him, would never come near her again. The storm broke quietly, not with a headline scandal or police sirens, but with a series of deliberate moves Andrew made behind closed doors. Sophia didn't know the details. He never told her exactly how. But within a week, Daniel Ross's name had all but vanished from the city's business pages. A merger he'd been pursuing collapsed overnight. His investors pulled out, and whispers circulated about a legal investigation. Andrew never confirmed any of it, but when she saw him again, there was a certain calm in his eyes, the kind of calm that comes only from a battle already won. For Sophia, life began to settle back into something resembling normal. She was offered her job back, this time with an upgraded position overseeing several of the park's specialty gardens. She wanted to believe it was just business, that Andrew had simply recognized her skill, but the truth hovered between them in a way that neither acknowledged outright. Lily noticed the change too. She began asking when Mr. Collins would visit again, her earlier shyness replaced with an eager curiosity. And when he did stop by, she would run to him with the small bouquets she liked to make from the garden's blooms. He always took them as if they were priceless gifts, never mind that the petals sometimes came bent or missing. It was during one of those visits, on a crisp autumn afternoon, that Sophia saw something she hadn't expected. Andrew was speaking with a group of investors near the main fountain. She was far enough away that she couldn't hear the words, but she could see the body language, the polite nods, the careful smiles. The investors gestured toward the open space behind the fountain, a prime location in the heart of the park. She caught a few words as she passed closer. Demolish the butterfly garden and make space for the event hall. Her chest tightened. The butterfly garden was one of her proudest projects, a sanctuary for dozens of species they'd worked hard to attract and protect. The idea of tearing it down made her stomach turn. She didn't say anything, not wanting to interfere. But the next day, she found out that the meeting had ended with Andrew walking away from the entire deal. Millions of dollars in potential revenue abandoned without hesitation. When she confronted him about it later, he simply said, "Some things aren't for sale." She searched his face, trying to read the truth there. "You could have taken that deal and still had the garden rebuilt somewhere else." "I didn't want it somewhere else," he replied. "I wanted it where you put it." It was such a simple statement, but it landed like a stone dropped into still water, sending ripples through her chest. In the weeks that followed, she found herself thinking about him more often than she liked to admit. Not just the way he looked, or the way his voice could turn quiet when he spoke to her, but the way he made choices, deliberate, final, protective in a way she hadn't experienced in years. One evening, after the last of the day's visitors had left the park, Sophia lingered near the fountain. The air was cool, scented with damp earth and the faint sweetness of late-blooming roses. Lily was skipping along the path ahead, humming to herself, when Andrew appeared from around the bend. "You're still here," he said, stopping a few feet away. "I was just thinking," she replied. "About?" She hesitated, then gave a small shrug. "About how rare it is to find someone who keeps their word. People make promises all the time, but keeping them, that's different." His gaze held hers, steady and unreadable. "You don't have to thank me, Sophia." "I'm not thanking you," she said softly. "I'm just noticing." There was a pause then, a kind of quiet that wasn't empty, but charged, like the air before a storm. She didn't step back when he closed the distance between them, and for a fleeting second, she thought he might reach for her hand. But instead, he looked past her, toward the winding path where Lily was now crouched, examining a cluster of fallen leaves. "You both deserve better than what you've had," he said finally, "and I intend to make sure you get it." For the first time in a long while, Sophia didn't feel the instinct to argue, to insist she could manage on her own. Because deep down, she knew. She trusted him. Spring came as if the city had been holding its breath all winter and was finally allowed to exhale. The air was softer, carrying the scent of blooming lilacs and freshly cut grass. The park, after months of preparation, was ready for its grand opening, a ribbon-cutting ceremony that would draw in city officials, reporters, and the public. Sophia stood near the East Garden, the one she'd designed with long rows of tulips that spilled into a sea of wildflowers. She had worn her best dress, simple, pale blue, the color of a morning sky. It wasn't fancy, but it felt right. Her hair was loose, the spring breeze lifting it gently off her shoulders. Lily was beside her in a white dress, patterned with tiny daisies, a ribbon tied neatly in her blonde hair. She clutched a bouquet of fresh flowers they had picked together that morning. From across the crowd, Sophia saw him. Andrew stood at the front near the podium, looking every bit the man who could command a room without raising his voice. The navy suit, the calm composure, the faint smile that appeared only when his gaze found hers. She felt the now familiar tug in her chest, the one she'd been trying not to name for weeks. The speeches began, officials talking about community projects, economic growth, and future expansions. But Sophia barely heard them. She was too focused on the way Andrew's eyes would occasionally search the crowd until they landed on her, holding there for a moment longer than necessary. When it was his turn to speak, his words were measured, his tone steady. He spoke about the vision for the park, the work that had gone into it, the dedication of his team. But then, near the end, his voice shifted, just slightly, and she felt as if the entire crowd had faded away. This park, he said, isn't just a project. It's proof of what can be built when people care enough to see it through. And some of the most beautiful parts of it exist because one person refused to compromise on what mattered. Sophia's breath caught. She knew he was speaking about her, though he never said her name. When the ribbon was cut and applause rippled through the air, Lily tugged at her mother's hand. "Can we give him the flowers now?" Sophia hesitated for half a second before nodding. They made their way through the thinning crowd until they reached him. Lily ran ahead the last few steps, holding out her bouquet with both hands. "These are for you," she said brightly. Andrew crouched to her level, accepting the flowers as if they were the most valuable thing he'd ever been given. "Thank you, Lily. They're perfect." When he straightened, his eyes met Sophia's. "Can we talk?" he asked quietly. She nodded, and they walked a little ways down the path, the noise of the crowd fading behind them. "You've done something remarkable here," she said, gesturing to the park. He shook his head slightly. "We've done something remarkable. You and me." Her pulse quickened at the quiet certainty in his voice. "I don't usually—" She paused, searching for the right words. "I've spent so long making sure no one could get close enough to hurt me or her that I forgot what it's like to let someone in." He stepped closer, his gaze never leaving hers. "And now?" "And now," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I'm starting to think I don't want to keep my distance anymore." For a moment, neither of them moved. The world around them seemed to narrow until it was just the two of them, standing in the middle of a garden she had once planted from bare earth. Then slowly, he reached for her hand. His fingers were warm, steady, and when she didn't pull away, he smiled faintly. "You found your peace here," he said softly. "Let me be part of it." Her lips curved into a small, genuine smile. "I think you already are." The moment stretched, the spring breeze carrying the scent of tulips and fresh grass between them. And then, almost without thinking, she leaned in. He met her halfway, the kiss gentle at first, as if testing the boundaries they'd both been so careful to keep. But when her fingers brushed lightly against his jaw, the kiss deepened, not rushed but certain, like something that had been waiting for the right moment all along. When they finally parted, Lily's voice broke the quiet. "Mommy," she called from a few steps away. "Are we going home now?" Sophia laughed softly, the sound light and unguarded. "In a minute, sweetheart." Andrew glanced toward the little girl, then back to Sophia. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. And for the first time in years, she believed it. "If you'd like, I can now compile all 8 detailed chapters into one seamless, novel-like story, so it reads as a complete work without breaks. Do you want me to prepare that for you?" This story, at its heart, was never just about romance. It was about trust. Andrew's world was built on control, strategy, and keeping emotions at a safe distance. Sophia's was built on resilience, survival, and the quiet courage of protecting her child at all costs. When they met, they didn't simply fall for each other. They dismantled the walls they had built around themselves. Andrew learned that strength isn't just in power, but in protecting without possession. Sophia learned that accepting help isn't weakness when it comes from someone who sees you, not as a problem to solve, but as a person to stand beside. The happy ending isn't just that they ended up together, it's that they found peace, and a place where both love and safety could exist side by side. And perhaps the most beautiful part is that it happened in the most unexpected way, proving that sometimes life's greatest gifts arrive when you've stopped looking for them.